Your attitude today might cost you more than money.
Relax, Judge. My dad can pay whatever it costs.
One more word like that, Miss Keller, and this hearing changes course.
Then change it. I've got lunch reservation.
Miss Keller, I suggest you take this seriously.
Judge, I suggest you hurry up.
Imagine walking into a courtroom as if it were a runway. Designer heels clicking on marble floors, phone in hand, face hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Every step screams confidence, entitlement, and the absolute belief that money erases consequences. That was Brianna Keller, 22 years old, daughter of millionaire developer Edward Keller, and about to experience a reality check she would never forget. The morning light cut through the stained glass windows of the Providence Municipal Court, scattering color across the floor like a spotlight made for judgment. The gallery whispered as Brianna entered, her perfume, her poise, her arrogance filling the room before she even spoke. To her, this wasn't a court of law, it was an interruption between brunch and a photo shoot. Her phone buzzed with notifications, each ping a reminder that her online world was far more important than the one she just stepped into. She didn't look at the bailiff. She didn't greet the judge. And she certainly didn't notice the faces watching her, some curious, others disgusted. Judge Frank Caprio, known nationwide for his kindness and patience, watched her with the calm expression of a man who had seen every kind of disrespect imaginable. But this was different. This was arrogance turned into performance. No one knew yet that in the next 8 minutes, this spoiled daughter would lose her license, her dignity, and her illusion of power. Every camera in the room would capture a downfall so swift it felt cinematic. The silence before it happened was heavy, like the breath the world takes before thunder strikes. Welcome to Real Judge Stories, where true moments of justice unfold before your eyes. Subscribe now and comment below. Would you have handled Brianna's arrogance the same way Judge Caprio did? Before that morning, Brianna Keller had never known a world that told her no. Her father, Edward Keller, was one of Providence's most influential property developers, a man whose donations could change campaign outcomes and whose last name opened doors faster than any key. From the age of 16, Brianna had lived in a bubble of luxury cars, private schools, and weekend getaways that blurred together like a highlight reel of privilege. Her universe was built on 3 things: attention, admiration, and the absolute certainty that consequences were meant for other people. Her friends called her the Princess of Downtown. She preferred Keller with a K. On social media, her stories overflowed with champagne glasses, designer labels, and soft-focus selfies captioned "Hustle and Sparkle." Her father's reputation made sure no ticket, no scandal, no minor scrape ever left a mark. She had learned early that money didn't just talk, it erased. That confidence carried her into Judge Caprio's courtroom like perfume trailing behind. She expected another routine inconvenience. A quick fine, a half-smile from the judge, maybe even a photo outside the courthouse for her followers with some ironic caption like, "Oops, my bad." But what Brianna didn't know was that this particular morning was different. Judge Caprio had read every detail of her record the night before. 7 violations in under 2 years. And unlike the others, he had no interest in polite warnings or checkbook apologies. As she stood at the defendant's podium, phone glowing in her hand, her reflection winked back from the polished wood. She adjusted her hair, scrolled through her messages, and ignored the quiet disapproval rising from the rows behind her. The bailiff called her name twice before she even looked up. When she finally did, her voice was sharp, detached, and dangerously confident. "Let's make this quick," she said. "I have a reservation in 20 minutes. The words dropped into the silent room like a spark into dry grass. Everyone knew something explosive was coming. And Judge Caprio, steady, composed, was already bracing to meet it. The heavy wooden doors of the Providence Municipal Court swung open, and the familiar rhythm of justice paused. Every conversation in the gallery tapered into a low hum as Brianna Keller strode forward. The soft echo of her heels ricocheted off marble and memory, the kind of sound that carried arrogance like perfume. Her designer tote, cream leather with gold initials, hung loosely from her arm as if she were entering a fashion event, not a legal proceeding. Judge Frank Caprio, seated beneath the state seal, watched her without judgment but with a quiet awareness honed over decades. He had seen the frightened, the ashamed, the desperate. But the young woman now walking toward the podium was none of those things. She radiated a confidence that bordered on contempt, the kind that came from a lifetime of never being told no. The bailiff gestured politely. "Miss Keller, please step forward." She didn't. Not immediately. Instead, she took her time finishing a message on her phone, thumbs tapping without urgency, as though the entire courtroom existed in the background of her schedule. Only after pressing send did she lift her gaze, sigh, and walk to the podium. In the gallery, an elderly woman whispered something to her companion. A man in a faded work uniform crossed his arms and muttered, "Here we go." You could feel the unspoken divide, ordinary citizens waiting for fairness, and the privileged one assuming immunity. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but unmistakably firm. "Good morning, Miss Keller. Please remove your sunglasses and put your phone away. This is a courtroom, not a cafe." Her head tilted. The faintest smirk crossed her face, an unspoken challenge. With a slow, exaggerated movement, she pushed the glasses onto her head but left her phone face up on the podium. "Happy now?" she said. The air tightened. Even the court reporter paused mid-keystroke. Caprio's expression never changed, but his tone did, cool, measured, authoritative. "Completely, Miss Keller. Now let's see if you can give this hearing the same attention you give your phone." The tension in the courtroom was visible now, as if the air itself had thickened. Brianna Keller leaned against the podium with one arm, her phone still glowing like a small act of rebellion. Judge Frank Caprio glanced at the file in front of him, a slim folder filled with far more trouble than its appearance suggested. "Miss Keller," he began evenly, "you're here for a series of violations: speeding 80 miles per hour in a 35 zone, expired registration, and refusal to sign a citation. Do you understand the charges?" She blinked, unimpressed. "I understand that I was running late and the officer was dramatic about it." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Someone exhaled sharply, another shook their head. Judge Caprio didn't look up. "The report also states you nearly struck a child riding a bicycle. The officer said you were within 3 feet of him." "That's exaggerated," Brianna cut in, folding her arms. "The kid shouldn't have been in the street. I'm a good driver." It was the kind of sentence that could empty a room of sympathy. The elderly woman in the second row muttered, "Unbelievable." Even the bailiff's neutral stance faltered for a moment. Judge Caprio's tone remained composed, but his patience was thinning at the edges. "Miss Keller, are you aware that residential speed limits exist precisely because children live there?" Brianna's answer came out as a scoff. "Everyone speeds. If they didn't want accidents, they'd raise the limit. I had a photo shoot, Judge. It's not like I was joyriding." Her words hung in the air, dripping entitlement. The judge finally raised his gaze, meeting hers directly for the first time. His eyes were calm but sharp, the eyes of a man who'd spent 40 years watching arrogance unravel. He spoke softly, but the authority in his voice carried through the room. "Miss Keller, I've given people breaks for hardship, for mistakes, for bad judgment under pressure. What I don't forgive is indifference. This isn't about your photo shoot. This is about responsibility." Brianna tilted her head, smiling faintly, unaware that her defiance had just crossed the invisible line between confidence and contempt. The silence that followed Judge Frank Caprio's words was brittle, so fragile it could shatter at the wrong breath. Brianna Keller, however, mistook it for weakness. She drummed her nails on the podium and sighed audibly, a sound designed to tell everyone how bored she was. "Judge, with all due respect," she began, her tone carrying none, "this feels a little excessive for a speeding ticket. Can we just skip the lecture part and get to the fine?" A ripple of disbelief moved through the gallery. One man whispered, "She didn't just say that," while another woman crossed her arms, lips pressed tight. Even the bailiff shifted his stance, a quiet signal that he was ready for anything. Judge Caprio didn't raise his voice. "You didn't need to. Miss Keller, I asked you earlier to put your phone away completely." Brianna's lips twitched with an almost smile. "It's away." He glanced at the device still face up and glowing beside her elbow. "Face down, please. Court is not a multitasking environment." With exaggerated slowness, she tapped her screen and flipped it over. "There. Happy now." The tone in her voice turned the word happy into mockery. The crowd murmured again. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, measuring his next words. "Miss Keller, this isn't a restaurant. You don't get to decide how this conversation goes." Her eyes rolled in a wide, theatrical arc. Fine, fine. Let's just finish this. I have a brand meeting at noon." The audacity hung heavy in the air. It was the sound of someone so sheltered by privilege that even public accountability seemed optional. Caprio folded his hands, patient as a storm held in place. "You seem to think your time is more valuable than everyone else's in this room. Let me remind you, you're here because your actions could have ended a life." Brianna's smirk faltered for a half-second, but pride caught it before it could fall. "Well, nothing happened. Can we move on?" That single line landed like a slap to every listener. Somewhere in the back row, a mother clenched her hands together, whispering, "That could have been my son." And for the first time since she entered, the faint trace of unease crossed Brianna's face, small, fleeting, but noticed by everyone. Judge Frank Caprio let the room breathe for a moment, the quiet stretching until even Brianna's confidence seemed to falter. He opened the file again, sliding a page closer to him. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured like the tick of a clock, but there was weight behind every syllable. "Miss Keller, this is not your first offense. You've accumulated 7 traffic violations in less than 2 years. Each time the fine was paid, the problem disappeared and you learned nothing." Brianna shrugged, arms folded like a teenager caught lying about curfew. "My dad took care of those. That's how it works, right? You pay the fine and move on." The judge looked up, finally meeting her gaze fully. His tone sharpened, not with anger but with unmistakable authority. "No, Miss Keller. That's not how it works. A fine isn't a ticket out of responsibility, it's a warning. And judging by your attitude today, it's a warning you've ignored." Her brows rose, incredulous. "You're seriously turning this into a morality lesson?" "It's just a ticket." That word just hung like smoke in the air. The crowd shifted, restless with disbelief. A man near the back muttered, "People like her never learn." Judge Caprio's patience, so famous it had become legend, reached its limit. He leaned forward, voice steady but edged with iron. "Miss Keller, when I ask for respect in this courtroom, it isn't for me, it's for the system that protects you. When you mock that system, you mock every person who obeys it. That ends now." Brianna opened her mouth, perhaps to protest, perhaps to make another joke, but his hand lifted slightly, stopping her cold. "You will remain silent until I finish speaking." The words weren't loud, but they carried like thunder. The gallery fell silent again, waiting for the next blow. For the first time, Brianna Keller's defiance cracked. She shifted uncomfortably, her phone screen still dark beside her hand, as if even it knew better than to light up now. The shift in the room was palpable, everyone could sense it. The trial of arrogance was about to become the lesson of a lifetime. Judge Frank Caprio reached for a thin envelope on his desk, one that hadn't yet been opened during the hearing. The movement was slow, deliberate, and strangely final. The audience leaned forward as he nodded to the clerk. "Let's bring something to everyone's attention before we proceed." The large monitor on the courtroom wall flickered to life. Brianna Keller frowned, clearly irritated. "What is this?" Caprio's tone didn't waver. "Evidence submitted by the officer handling your case. I think it will help us understand your attitude today." The lights dimmed slightly as the screen revealed a short video, one that made the entire courtroom gasp. It was a clip from Brianna's own social media account, posted only 3 days earlier. The camera showed her driving, one hand on the wheel, the other holding her phone, smiling at the camera as the speedometer ticked past 90. Her voice filled the courtroom speakers, cheerful and mocking. "Daddy's lawyers are better than any judge in this city," she laughed into the phone, the words captured perfectly. The sound of her own arrogance echoed off the walls. In the gallery, a woman covered her mouth. A man whispered, "Unbelievable." Even the bailiff hesitated, momentarily stunned. Brianna's face went pale. That was a joke," she stammered. "It was just for my followers." Judge Caprio leaned slightly forward, his tone still composed but now razor-sharp. "A joke? 90 miles per hour while filming yourself, mocking the very system you're standing in front of, that's your idea of humor?" Before she could answer, the clerk advanced to the next slide, a screenshot of another post. Brianna posed outside the courthouse doors, captioned, "Traffic court again. Poor people trying to feel important." A murmur of outrage swept the room. The elderly woman in the second row whispered fiercely, "She called us poor people." Judge Caprio let the noise rise, then lifted his hand. The silence that followed was heavy. His eyes never left Brianna's. "You didn't just break the law, Miss Keller," he said quietly. "You mocked it. And now, for once, it's going to speak back." Before Judge Frank Caprio could continue, a voice from the back of the courtroom rose above the charged silence. "Your Honor, if I may." All eyes turned. Edward Keller, dressed in an immaculate navy suit, stood slowly from the last row. For the first time, his face, usually the picture of confidence and control, looked hollow. The father who could silence investors with a word now looked like a man who'd finally run out of them. Caprio studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Keller." Edward walked toward the front, each step heavier than the last. "Your Honor," he began softly, "my daughter is young and foolish. I'll pay whatever fines are necessary. I'll make sure she attends traffic school. Please, let's just resolve this quietly. The offer hung in the air, but no one in the room felt sympathy. This was the ritual everyone had seen before, money sweeping away mistakes. Judge Caprio's voice remained calm, but its gentleness carried a quiet edge. Mr. Keller, that's the problem. You've been resolving things quietly for years. You've turned consequences into transactions. How's that working out for you? Edward hesitated. His jaw tightened, but his shoulders slumped in defeat. She's my only child, he admitted. Her mother passed when she was little. Maybe I spoiled her to keep her from feeling the loss. I thought I was protecting her. The courtroom fell still again, sympathy flickering briefly in the air, but Caprio's gaze didn't soften. Protection without discipline isn't love, Mr. Keller. It's permission to fail without learning. Behind him, Brianna snapped, her voice trembling between panic and defiance. Dad, stop. You don't have to say all this. Just call the lawyers. But Edward turned to her, eyes filled with regret deeper than anger. No, Brianna. This time I won't. The look that passed between them wasn't one of father and daughter. It was of an enabler and the person he had created. And as that truth settled, even Brianna's voice faltered into silence. Judge Frank Caprio rose from his seat, and the room seemed to rise with him, not physically but in gravity. The atmosphere shifted from courtroom to classroom, where every soul present was about to learn something about justice. Miss Keller, he began, your conduct today has been one of the most disrespectful displays I have witnessed in nearly 4 decades on this bench. His tone was calm, but every word landed like a gavel. You mocked the law, endangered lives, and treated this court as a stage for your ego. Brianna stood frozen, her face drained of its practiced confidence. The phone that once glowed defiantly now lay lifeless on the podium, a symbol of a kingdom suddenly without power. For reckless driving at 80 miles per hour in a 35 zone, Caprio continued, I'm fining you $1,000. For expired registration, $500. For contempt of court based on your behavior today, $2,500. He paused, letting each number settle in the air like weights on her shoulders. In total, $4,000 due immediately. No extensions. No family assistance. The judge wasn't finished. Your driver's license will be suspended for 6 months. You will complete 80 hours of community service with the Providence Youth Safety Program, teaching young students what happens when arrogance meets asphalt. You will also attend a victim impact panel, and write a 2,000-word reflection on the importance of humility before the law. Gasps rippled through the gallery. It wasn't vengeance, it was balance. Brianna's voice cracked. You can't do that. My dad. Caprio raised his hand gently, silencing her. Your father has done enough. This time you will pay your own way. If not within 90 days, a warrant will be issued for your arrest. The courtroom fell into complete stillness. Even the air felt heavy with consequence. For once, Brianna Keller had no comeback, no laughter, no audience left to impress. Just the sound of justice, firm, unshaken, and echoing longer than any applause ever could. The gavel struck once, and the sound rippled through the courtroom like thunder finally finding its echo. Brianna Keller stood motionless, staring ahead but seeing nothing. The weight of humiliation pressed down heavier than any fine could. The phone she had once guarded like a crown jewel now sat untouched, its glow replaced by the cold reality of consequence. Judge Frank Caprio gathered his papers quietly, his tone softening to something almost paternal. Miss Keller, he said, you are 22. Young enough to change the story you've been writing for yourself. 5 years from now, you can look back on today as the worst day of your life, or as the day you finally grew up. The choice is yours. The courtroom remained silent. Even the usual shuffling of feet and rustle of papers had stopped. When Caprio finally stepped away from the bench, the spell broke. Conversations began again in low murmurs, but none were careless. Every person leaving that room carried a piece of what they had just witnessed. Brianna turned toward her father. Edward Keller met her eyes, not with anger but with something far heavier, resolve. You'll handle this yourself, he said quietly. It's time. And for the first time in her life she didn't argue. Outside, the autumn air bit cold against her face as camera flashes waited by the courthouse steps. But the girl who emerged wasn't the same one who had entered. The defiance was gone. In its place was a fragile kind of silence, a beginning disguised as shame. As the doors closed behind her, Judge Caprio's words lingered in the minds of everyone who heard them. Respect isn't given to those with money. It's earned by those who listen. Subscribe to Real Judge Stories for more true courtroom lessons where arrogance meets accountability.